Step one more inch and you'll regret it. That's all I said. She froze mid-stride, one polished heel buried in my damp grass, clipboard trembling in her hand. The morning sprinklers hissed softly, mist glowing gold in the sun. The look on her face said she wasn't used to anyone talking to her like that. Karen Blake. HOA president. Queen of Maple Creek. She had that kind of smile that could curdle cream. She pointed her pen at me like a weapon. You don't tell the HOA where to walk, Mr. Thompson. This is community access. Community didn't pay for the sod you're standing on. Her jaw twitched. Without another word, she turned and waved to her driver. The silver SUV crept forward, right across my lawn, grinding deep black tracks into the wet earth. I didn't shout. Didn't move. Just watched the mud sling up her fenders and thought, that's the last time she crosses this line. When her car finally vanished around the corner, I stepped to the edge of the grass, water dripping from my boots, and pressed my hand into the ruts she'd carved. The earth felt bruised. All right, I whispered. If the HOA wants a shortcut, I'll give them one they'll never forget. That was the moment everything changed, because my next move wasn't revenge. It was engineering. Her SUV rolled to a stop the next morning like it owned the whole street. Out stepped Karen Blake, 49 years old, every inch polished, pearl earrings, stiff blazer, posture sharp enough to slice glass. She wasn't just any neighbor. She was the neighbor, the self-appointed monarch of Maple Creek, judge, jury, and executioner of neighborhood standards. "Morning, Mr. Thompson," she said, voice smooth as bleach. "You might want to keep your corner trimmed." The boards received complaints. I stared at the muddy tire marks still scarring my yard. Complaints from who? Yourself. Karen tilted her head. Community property is everyone's responsibility. And then, to make her point, she stepped right back onto my grass, heels sinking into the soil, and waved her driver forward again. The SUV rolled over the same patch, chewing through the turf I'd just reseeded. I didn't react. Just watched. Calculating. Because people like Karen only understand consequences when they're permanent. That evening, a notice was taped to my mailbox. Violation. Improper ground maintenance. Fine, $150. Signed, President Blake. The paper was light, but the message behind it was heavy. This wasn't a warning, it was a declaration. And if Karen Blake wanted a war over grass, she just picked the wrong electrician to mess with. 3 days later, an envelope appeared wedged under my front door. No stamp, no return address. Just the HOA logo printed across the top in smug blue ink. Remove the unauthorized barrier within 48 hours or face community action. I didn't have a barrier. Not yet. But that letter told me everything I needed to know. Karen was already planning her next move before I'd even made mine. So that night, I made mine. I installed a new camera, facing the street this time. Around 11:30 p.m., my phone buzzed, motion alert. 2 figures in dark clothes, shovels in hand, were creeping across my lawn. They pulled up my property stakes and replanted them 6 feet closer to my porch. It wasn't random vandalism. It was surgical theft. The next morning, I measured the distance myself. My corner lot had suddenly shrunk. By noon, Karen's silver SUV rolled up again. She lowered her window, that same smirk plastered on her face. "Everything looks so much better now," she said. I raised my phone, took a picture and said quietly, "Smile, President Blake. You're standing on evidence." Her grin faltered for the first time. That single photo was more than proof. It was the first crack in her empire. 2 mornings later, another envelope appeared. Community conduct hearing notice. Apparently, I was being summoned for aggressive behavior toward board members. Aggressive? I hadn't even raised my voice. But I went anyway. The HOA clubhouse smelled like printer ink, perfume, and arrogance.
You can't just let them take our
Karen
land.
sat
That
dead
footage
center
proves
at a
they were
long table
trespassing.
flanked by 3
I
board
understand your
members who looked
frustration,
more
but we
like
have
her
to follow
backup
the law
singers than
regarding the
officials. "Mr. Thompson," she began sweetly, "your behavior has created tension in our community. Several residents have complained about your hostility." I leaned forward. "You mean the residents who keep driving through my yard?" Murmurs rippled across the room. Karen's smile tightened. If you continue making false accusations, she said, the board will consider disciplinary action, including suspension of neighborhood privileges. I laughed softly. You mean like owning my house? Her tone dropped to ice. Enjoy your little patch of grass while you can, Mr. Thompson. The HOA always wins. I stood up and walked out. No words left to waste. But as the door clicked shut behind me, something clicked inside me too. I wasn't going to fight her with anger. I'd fight her with precision. That night, I pulled out my old electrician schematics, and revenge started to look a lot like a blueprint. Saturday morning, I drove straight to Tony's Hardware. The bell over the door jingled, and the smell of metal and sawdust hit me like nostalgia. Marcus, Tony said, squinting through his glasses. Haven't seen you since you retired. What are you fixing now? I smiled. Boundaries. He raised an eyebrow. That bad, huh? Worse, I said. Got any motion sensors, floodlights, weatherproof wiring? Tony laughed. You planning a party or a war? Maybe both. By noon, my truck bed was full, lights, steel posts, conduit pipes, and more cable than most small businesses. I spent the entire day digging, wiring, testing. Every line buried deep beneath the soil, every connection sealed and hidden. By nightfall, my yard looked untouched. But under that peaceful grass ran a circuit designed for one purpose: to teach trespassers a lesson in illumination. At 7:05 a.m. sharp, right on schedule, Karen's SUV turned the corner. The tires rolled onto my grass. Click. The ground erupted in blinding white light. Motion sensors flaring one after another like a chain reaction. Karen slammed the brakes, shielding her face. I raised my coffee cup and smiled. Morning, President Blake. Beautiful day for boundaries. But that was just the opening act. The real surprise was still buried deeper. The next morning, I woke to another motion alert. There she was, Karen Blake herself, wearing black workout clothes, stomping on my lawn, kicking at the sensors like she was fighting ghosts. She didn't realize the camera had night vision. I uploaded the clip to our neighborhood group chat with one caption: testing the HOA's new morning fitness program. By lunchtime, half the community had seen it. The comments exploded. Laughter, jokes, even a meme or two. At 5 p.m., a city inspector knocked on my door. Clipboard in hand. Anonymous complaint, he said. Something about illegal electrical installations. I grinned. Come on in. I'll show you what legal looks like. And that's when I saw the signature on the inspection order: The Whitmore. Derek Whitmore. Karen's husband. HOA treasurer. City contractor. It wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was corruption wrapped in city stationery. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, logging every detail: times, names, footage, signatures. Because in my world, every current leaves a trace. And the next one I found would expose much more than just an HOA. Electricians have a saying: current never lies. It always tells you where it's been, what it's touched, and who tried to hide it. By the next morning, I was already tracing wires, but not in the dirt this time. In paper trails. Karen had crossed my lawn, but Derek, her husband, the HOA treasurer, had crossed something bigger. The first clue came from a city inspector named Halvorsen. He called me after hours, nervous. Said my name had come up in a routine cross-check between property survey files and maintenance invoices. Off the record, he whispered, some of those signatures don't match. You didn't sign your last inspection, did you? I hadn't. He sent me a scanned copy. There it was, my name, forged clean across a document authorizing trench work I'd never ordered. Below it, another signature: D. Whitmore. That was all I needed. I opened my old briefcase, the one I'd sworn I'd never use again, and pulled out a battered folder labeled Voltage Logs. Inside, I began my new project, except this time, it wasn't electrical. It was legal circuitry. By the weekend, I'd built a network, maps, screenshots, HOA memos, city permits, all connecting back to the same source, Derek's contracting firm. And guess whose approval he needed for every payout? Karen's. Together, they'd built a perfect little feedback loop. She approved the fake maintenance, he billed it, the HOA paid themselves, and nobody asked questions. Because who would dare question the queen and her treasurer? But I wasn't just anyone. That Sunday, I stood by the fence as the sunset turned the ranch gold. Karen's silver SUV rolled by slow, windows down, pretending she didn't see me. But I could feel it. She knew I was digging. A few hours later, my motion sensors triggered again. Except this time, it wasn't Karen. Two men in reflective vests were standing at my gate, cutting through a lock with bolt cutters. City workers, or so their uniforms claimed. I stepped out, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other. "Evening, gentlemen," I said calmly. "You got a permit for that?" They froze. One of them muttered something about routine maintenance. "Routine doesn't happen at midnight," I said. They bolted. I caught one of their faces on camera. Later, when I ran the photo through the county contractor directory, the result came back. Whitmore Electric, subcontractor. The husband was officially in the game. Monday morning, I went to City Hall. The clerk looked bored until I dropped a folder onto her desk. Photos, signatures, timestamps, every violation color-coded. She blinked. "Sir, this looks like fraud." I nodded. "And I think your inspector knows it." She picked up the phone. Within an hour, 2 internal investigators showed up. By afternoon, Karen's husband's name had been flagged in 3 different municipal projects. That night, I poured myself a drink and waited. It didn't take long. At 9:17 p.m., my motion sensor pinged again. Karen. Standing by the fence. Arms folded. "You think you're clever," she said, voice trembling. "You're making enemies you can't handle." I stepped closer to the gate. Funny. I thought the HOA handled community matters. Didn't realize it included city contracts. Her eyes flashed. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about." I held up my phone, the footage of her husband's workers cutting my lock. The color drained from her face. "You're finished," she hissed before storming back to her car. But I wasn't. I was just warming up. 2 days later, it all blew open. The local paper ran a headline, "Homeowner uncovers fraud in Maple Creek HOA contracts." My phone didn't stop ringing. Neighbors, reporters, even a few city employees, everyone wanted to talk. It turned out Derek had been falsifying invoices not just for our HOA, but for 3 others in the district. Over $50,000 in maintenance fees had vanished into thin air. And the audit trail? It all started from a motion-activated camera on my fence. Karen tried to call an emergency HOA meeting to address misinformation, but only 2 people showed up, her and her reflection in the window. By midweek, she was pacing her driveway, phone glued to her ear, barking orders into the receiver. The SUV that once gleamed now sat dented, streaked with mud and pride. I watched from my porch as she shouted at someone on the line. Then she noticed me, and the camera pointed right at her. She hung up, straightened her blouse, and forced that brittle smile. "Hope you're proud," she said, voice shaking. "You've destroyed this community." I took a sip of coffee. "No, Karen. I just turned the lights on." The following morning, 2 county vehicles pulled up to her house. Investigators. Clipboards. By noon, word spread that both Karen and Derek had been suspended pending a fraud investigation. The HOA board went silent. Their website disappeared. The Maple Creek Facebook group, once full of her daily rules and rants, suddenly filled with memes. My personal favorite, Karen's SUV in my grass with the caption, "Community access revoked." Even the quiet neighbors started waving to me again. But peace didn't come right away. A few days later, I got a letter from an attorney, Karen's. It accused me of harassment, defamation, and vigilante interference. I laughed out loud. She was still playing chess with a checkers set. So I sent back my own letter, just one sentence. "Everything I've said is supported by evidence, timestamps, and your client's signature." That was the last I ever heard from her lawyer. That night, Mason, my old buddy from the electric company, called. "Man, you've made the news. Retired electrician takes down HOA corruption. That's some superhero stuff." Superhero? I laughed. I'm just tired of people thinking laws don't apply to them." He chuckled. Still, poetic justice, huh? Electricity exposing corruption. I paused, smiling. Guess you could say karma's got good wiring. For a while, everything went quiet. Too quiet. The HOA sign at the entrance vanished overnight. Karen's silver SUV disappeared from her driveway. And for the first time in months, the ranch was calm again. The wind carried only the sound of crickets and distant laughter from kids who could finally play without being fined for it. But something about that silence felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Because I knew Karen Blake wasn't the kind of woman to disappear quietly. And I was right. 3 nights later, she came back. Headlights cut through the dark, stopping at the gate. The engine idled. Then the door opened, slow. And in that thin slice of moonlight, I saw her holding something shiny in her hand. It wasn't a clipboard this time. It was a hammer. The night came down slow and heavy, thick with that strange silence only open land knows. My motion lights stood like sentinels along the fence, glowing pale gold in the dark. I sat on the porch with the laptop open, the camera feeds lined up like soldiers waiting for orders. Every few seconds, a coyote barked in the distance. Then, motion alert. South Gate. I leaned closer. There she was. Karen Blake. Same polished arrogance, but not dressed like a queen this time. She wore a dark jacket, gloves, and a face full of fury. In her right hand, a flashlight. In her left, a hammer. For a moment, she just stood there at the gate, breathing hard. Then she lifted the hammer and smashed the padlock clean off. The sound echoed through the feed. Clang. I hit record. Showtime. Karen shoved the gate open, metal scraping against dirt. She stepped inside my land, muttering something to herself, her flashlight beam darting like a nervous heartbeat. Every step she took lit another sensor, each one feeding to a camera, every angle locked on her face. By the time she reached the barn, she'd already triggered 5 cameras and 2 alarms I'd muted for this exact reason. I could have called the sheriff right then. But I didn't. Because this wasn't about stopping her, it was about proving her. The air felt charged, like the moment before lightning hits. Karen stopped near the water trough, pulling a small plastic bottle from her coat pocket. I zoomed in. The label caught the light. Acidic cleaner. Industrial strength. She was going to vandalize me. I whispered, gotcha. Then, from the edge of the screen, headlights. A truck rolled in slow, tires crunching over gravel. Jim, always on time. He parked without a word and stepped out, phone in hand, recording from the road. 2 witnesses now, me on the cameras, Jim in person. Karen spun at the sound of the engine. You, she screamed, voice shaking. You think you can trap me on my own property? Your property? Jim called back, calm but sharp. Ma'am, you broke a gate. She hesitated, and for a heartbeat I saw it. Realization. Then her rage swallowed it. She flung the bottle toward the barn, but it hit the dirt short, splattering harmlessly. Karen, stop, I said, stepping out onto the porch, my phone aimed steady as a rifle. You're trespassing. You're being recorded from 6 angles. Just walk away. Her face twisted. You set me up. No, I said. You walked right in. That's when the sprinklers kicked on. A soft hiss first, then a rush of water arcing through the air. Not just water. I'd mixed a tracer dye into the line earlier that week. Perfectly safe, invisible until activated by heat. Under the moonlight, it looked clear. But when it hit skin, it reacted. Within seconds, pale green streaks began to bloom across Karen's jacket and hands. At first, she didn't notice. Then she looked down. Her eyes went wide. What is this? What did you? It's harmless, I said. Just proof. Glows under UV. Means I can show exactly where you went, what you touched. Jim flipped on his flashlight, a harsh white beam. The green lit up like wildfire across her sleeves, her face, her shoes. Oh my God, she gasped, stepping back. You assaulted me. No, ma'am, Jim said flatly. You assaulted yourself. She dropped the hammer and ran for the gate, slipping in the mud. The sprinklers followed, lighting her path like a glowing crime scene. I stayed on the porch, recording every step. By the time she made it to her SUV, she looked like a streaked ghost, glowing green under the moon. She sped off, tires screeching, leaving muddy arcs behind her like a retreating army. I let the cameras roll another full minute before cutting the feed. Jim turned to me, half shocked, half laughing. "You planned that?" "Every inch," I said. "Now she can't claim innocence." We stood there in silence, the night air thick with ozone and victory. Somewhere in the dark, a bull lowed, deep, satisfied, like even the land approved. By morning, the footage was already circulating. Someone on the neighborhood group chat had seen the glow from the road and asked what happened. Jim uploaded a still frame before I could stop him. Karen, mid-run, neon green under the lights. The caption, HOA goes radioactive. Within hours, the post blew up. Memes, jokes, even a short remix video of her running through the sprinklers. Half the neighborhood couldn't stop laughing. The other half suddenly remembered they'd been afraid of her. But the laughter didn't last long, because Karen wasn't done. At 10 a.m., a sheriff's cruiser rolled up my drive. Officer Ruiz again, same man from the earlier incident. He stepped out slow, looking equal parts amused and exhausted. "Mr. Harding," he said, "you've got quite the morning." "Let me guess," I said. "Karen's pressing charges." He smiled faintly. "Attempted assault, vandalism, and harassment, her words, not mine. But she also posted a live video about it. You might want to see this." He showed me his phone. Karen stood in front of her SUV, face streaked with green, sobbing into the camera. "This man attacked me on my own community property," she cried. "He set a chemical trap." Ruiz sighed. "Thing is, her video metadata shows she was inside your fence line. We'll still take statements, but you're fine. I just need your footage." I handed him a USB. All angles. Time-stamped. He nodded. "You're thorough. You should work for us." I laughed softly. "I'm retired. I just like clean wiring." He grinned, pocketed the drive, and headed back to his car. As he drove off, I looked out over the wet grass, the glinting fence, the glowing footprints that still shimmered faintly in the morning light. It wasn't triumph I felt, it was relief. Karen had spent months turning this neighborhood into her stage. But tonight, the curtain finally dropped. Still, a small voice inside me whispered, "She's not finished yet." And I was right. That evening, my phone buzzed again, unknown number. I almost didn't answer. A low, trembling voice came through the speaker. "You think you won, Marcus?" I knew that voice. "Karen, you embarrassed me. You humiliated me in front of everyone. But this isn't over. I'll burn your piece down with me." Silence. I set the phone down, staring out at the horizon. The sun was sinking, and somewhere out there, I could almost feel the storm gathering again. The call ended, but her voice clung to the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. I stood there on the porch long after the line went dead, watching the horizon fade from orange to iron gray. Out past the fence, the bulls were restless, pacing slow circles in the dusk. Even they felt it, the current of something unfinished. Inside, the house hummed with quiet machines. Cameras uploading, drives whirring. I checked every feed twice, copied everything to a fresh USB, sealed it in a metal case, and dropped it into my safe. Habit. Protection. Proof. Because in this neighborhood, peace didn't last unless you documented it. By 10:30 the wind kicked up. I shut the porch light off and sat in the dark with a mug of coffee gone cold. Gravel crunched on the road. Headlights swept over the trees, bright, searching. The SUV again. Karen's crawling past my gate. For a heartbeat I thought she might stop, come out screaming, but she only idled there. Through the windshield I could see her face washed in dashboard light. Not angry now, just hollow. Then she hit the gas and vanished down the road. The taillights bled into the night like embers dying in water. The next morning, Jim called before sunrise. "She's at it again," he said. "Posted a video at 3 a.m. claims you poisoned the irrigation." I sighed. Let her talk. Every word digs her deeper. When I walked outside, I realized how right I was. 2 county vehicles sat by the curb, environmental health. Officer Ruiz leaned against his cruiser, coffee in hand. Morning, Mr. Harding. Routine follow-up. Mind if we take a sample? Go ahead, I said, and watched them test the sprinklers, the trough, the soil. The readings blinked safe, clean, boring. Ruiz signed the sheet and handed me a copy. Non-toxic, he said. As expected. We'll close it out today. Karen's last lifeline snapped that afternoon. Her live streams had been ammunition, but they turned on her. One local blogger pulled the metadata and lined it up against my footage. Side by side, frame by frame, it showed everything. The gate break, the hammer, the cleaner bottle. Proof so clear it didn't need commentary. By evening, the clip had gone viral. Hashtag Green Justice. Hashtag evils. Hashtag Boundaries Matter. I didn't laugh. I'd seen reputations burn before. They never make light, only ash. 2 days later, the HOA called an emergency transparency meeting. Translation: panic. I wasn't invited, but half the neighborhood sent me recordings. Karen tried to speak, voice shaking, words sliding between apology and accusation, until Paul, the HOA president, dropped a file on the table. Audit results. Missing maintenance funds. Duplicate invoices. Her signature on all of them. The room went silent except for the buzz of a dying fluorescent bulb. She left halfway through, flanked by 2 officers. No cuffs. Not yet. Just a quiet escort and a stack of paperwork that said more than any handcuffs could. That night, the subdivision was eerily still. No SUV. No shouting. Only wind in the grass and the faint creak of the gate settling back into place. Jim stopped by with a 6-pack. So that's it, he asked. Maybe, I said. But peace doesn't come cheap. He nodded, glancing toward the fence line glowing under the moon. Worth every penny. Weeks passed. The county investigation widened. Turns out Karen's husband, Derek, had been rerouting HOA payments through his contracting firm, a quiet embezzlement ring dressed as community maintenance. When it all came out, they both resigned in disgrace. The HOA board dissolved. The neighborhood held open elections for the first time in years. The day after the results, a knock echoed on my door. It wasn't the heavy kind. It was tentative, polite. A young woman stood there, clipboard tucked under her arm, sunlight catching the edge of her badge. Mr. Harding? I'm Lena Perez. I'm the new HOA chair. Owe you an apology. I smiled, genuinely this time. No apology needed. Just keep the lines clear. She laughed softly. We plan to. We're rewriting everything. No secret votes, no private fines. Good, I said. Transparency's the best security system there is. Before she left, she glanced past me toward the gate. That post of yours, the one that started it all, we've been calling it the marker. A few neighbors want to build their own. Then let them, I said. Boundaries aren't walls. They're reminders. When the door closed, the quiet felt different. For the first time in months, the air didn't hum with tension. It breathed. Spring came early that year. The pastures greened up fast, the bulls lazed under the oak trees, and the sensor lights went weeks without a single trigger. Sometimes, late at night, I'd replay a clip, the one where the sprinklers glowed and Karen realized the game was over. Not out of cruelty, just to remind myself what patience looks like when it wins. Justice, I'd learned, isn't loud. It's procedural. It comes in reports, timestamps, and quiet signatures. It's the sound of a gate swinging closed and staying that way. One evening, Jim dropped by again. Still keeping watch? He teased. Old habits, I said. He raised his beer. To old habits that keep fools out. We clinked bottles, and for the first time, the sound didn't echo back off anger. It just disappeared into the calm. As the sun slipped down, I looked at the marker, steel post, concrete base, roses blooming around it, roots gripping the soil like a promise. It wasn't vengeance anymore. It was balance. Proof that even on the smallest patch of land, fairness can take root. I leaned back in the chair, let the cicadas fill the silence, and whispered the only prayer a man with boundaries ever needs. Let peace hold. Because peace, I'd learned, isn't what happens when the noise stops. It's what happens when you build something strong enough to survive it.